Colder. All black. It's black on the with a soldier painted band. Yeah.
So it kind of seems to be rotating with one stop and one start. So better. Yeah, social Sunday.
But anyways,
That's really nice.
oh, no.
Last year, she was going to
We're not supposed to red. It's different.
Yeah. Swimming thing? I was actually able to take us through what you said. Kind of slow and then fast. Oh, really?
Speaking was like,
That was more of your monotoner and trying to get more in the catch, trying to get more there instead of
set it up, and then when you get on
high and full. Yeah, actually, I found my lats for the first time. Excellent. I got extremely exhausted, yes. Well, I am currently a client here, so working on shoulder injury from Jesus, I know. I did. I just saw this.
We bust, but it's big.
Right, and I was just really small. Yes, and I kind of regret not getting on your machine when you were here.
Try out.
Whenever
This is that?
picture, you know,
Oh, this was the
picture you
LA
sitting on
half
there and
marathon.
rotating.
I ran this one to qualify for New York last year, and then of course it was
Yeah,
so,
That's cool. What race is the other?
I got a bunch. I got triathlon, bike races, run
I
races.
was thinking that.
Some swims too. I'm registered for 12 races right now in September.
Well, my coach calls you.
You're gonna be busy.
Well, the trouble is, the reason I'm here is I'm kind of jacked up my foot here doing the Colorado Marathon. Last Sunday.
You can just see.
You roll it or roll it or just
Well, the first day, like,
60, my feet are flattening. My bones are actually resorting themselves. I don't know. I mean, I've got something more than it's beyond planning. I'm not quite sure. But I'm resting it right now.
don't know minutes. I guess I was able to keep up
Yeah,
there
I'll be.
with
I'm
having this.
probably just dropping high at the run or doing an auto bike option or something like that.
So we're doing that console for
So I guess it did
anyone who wants to that console.
make
Just
it
gonna
easier.
talk with the
So
PT on
I
Rebound.
was faster, so
What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Free pencil.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and get started, guys.
Anyway, besides let you know.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. It's smaller group this week.
I was
We'll kind of keep it informal. So if you have questions as you go, just raise your hands.
You guys say
Again, just smaller group, and so just let me know if you have questions as we go. Before we start, we do have a bunch of giveaways again this week. Like last week, we got stuff from athletes and Canada. We have some race entries. We have stuff from green events and the Horseshoe Tri-Training Series. Stuff from Runners Roost, again, they're an awesome sponsor. So a bunch of good stuff. Just make sure you sign it on the front. Because Kelsey's going to do some random drawings throughout the top. If you're not signed up, then tonight we're going to talk about some injury prevention and management stuff for triathletes. It's going to piggyback a little bit from last week's talk. We talked about biomechanics with Eric and Patrick. And so hopefully some of that will carry over to tonight. So, well, before I start, a little background on me. Did you have a question?
Well, you mentioned the last talk. I couldn't make it.
Okay.
Can you give like a minute summary or something like that for anyone here?
We talked. I talked a little bit about running biomechanics, about just what the current literature and some of the experts are saying that how we should be running, and just small little tweaks that we can make to improve our running. Then we had Eric. He talked about swimming mechanics. We had a dry lane swim trainer with a Vasa Irving. We looked at some sort of strokes on that. And then Patrick Ray's he's a bike, kind of a bike expert in town. We talked a little bit about bike. And so we'll, I'm sure Eric will hang around if you want to talk to him about swimming. Talk about a little background on me. I grew up in Loveland, just down the road to Loveland High. I ran cross country track, and I got injured a ton in high school. I had all kinds of running injuries. So I could never really train like I wanted to during high school. But I wanted to be a good runner. So I went to CU for my undergrad, and I wanted to run cross country for them. And they have a really good program. And to run there, you have to be able to run about 100 miles a week to be able to get at that level. So I ran my miles up. I get to 50 or 60 miles a week, and then I would get injured. And this happened for 2 or 3 years when I was at CU. I couldn't keep ramping it up before I got injured or some other different injury happened. So I've had about every running injury there is to have. It's been a lot. And so when I was at CU, because of all the injuries, I really got into triathlon. So I got into cross training, riding my bike, and swimming. And even then, I'd train with the guys there, and I kept getting into that. I had shoulder stuff, I had knee stuff, all kinds of stuff I've done. And so I wanted to create a talk or give out some information that would have really helped me 15 years ago. If someone told me this information 15 years ago, I wouldn't be injured nearly as much as I was. So hopefully you guys can take home some of this information and help you in the future. How many of you guys, is anyone injured today? Or are you talking here? It's got some stuff going on a little bit. Well, we may talk about that as we go. The triathlon injuries, they're pretty common. Depending on the research study that you look at, 50-65% of us will get injured over a season. So they say some of the research says 75% will be injured over a 5-year period. So a lot of us are going to get injured. About 30% are in the shoulder from swimming. But most of it is at or below the knee. And this is very similar to some running statistics and cycling statistics. So injuries happen. But there's a difference between acute injuries and overuse injuries. Acute injuries are the ones where we, like this guy, you hit some railroad tracks and you do an endo and you break a collarbone. That's an acute injury. That's something that it's just a misfortune and a broken bone or some road rash. Overuse injuries are what we're going to talk about tonight. So these are our nemesis. This is what we're always fighting against so that we keep training. It's the cumulative microtraumas in our body that leads to pain and makes us stop doing what we want to do. So why do they occur? There's external and internal factors. The external factors we talked a little bit about last week with the biomechanics of the bike fit and the swim technique. There's also training issues. You can have the best biomechanics in the world, but if you run marathon after marathon after marathon, you're going to get injured. Your body just can't handle so much stress. There's technique comes into that. Again, with the bike fit and the swim technique, if you have a terrible bike fit, then you could get injured. But then there's the internal factors, and again, that's what we're going to talk about tonight, the internal factors, the biomechanical stuff that we see here in the clinic. What I did, I broke it down into 3 common internal factors that lead to injury. The muscle imbalance, neuromuscular inhibition, and common patterns of compensation. And to talk about this, I like to use an analogy that I wrote about in the paper a couple of years ago. The alarm versus the fire. So if the alarms are going off in your house, your fire alarms are going off, you don't go to each room and just get a broomstick and hit the alarm off the ceiling. You don't, and go to the next room and just hit the alarm up. You go find the source of what's causing the alarm. You go put out the fire. And so in our body, the alarms are our injuries, our symptoms, our aches and pains. That's our body's way of saying that something is biomechanically off. So the fires is the biomechanical issues. And these are the 3 fires that we see in the clinic. The first one is a muscle imbalance. So in the medical field, we think of the body in 3 different planes. We see a sagittal plane that breaks the body up into left and right halves. The frontal plane, which is front and back halves. And then the transverse plane is the rotation plane. With most of our training with running, biking, even swimming, we're in this one plane of motion, sagittal plane. So we become really strong and developed with those muscles and those movements. And then we find that we get weak in the other planes, the frontal planes and the transverse planes. And so we'll see muscle weaknesses in those planes. So that's one source of fire that we see. Second one is neuromuscular inhibition or overactivation. The muscles are very dynamic. They're always in a state of contraction and relaxation all the time. They're always in this flux. And what we'll find are some muscles don't work very well, or they don't work when they need to be working, and other muscles are working way too hard. But there's a distinction. Again, they're not working at the right time, or they're working too hard at the wrong time. The big one for this are glutes. Has anyone been a patient here at Rebound? How many of you guys have worked on glutes? So it's a big one. It's a big one for endurance athletes. Those muscles are often found just not to work right because of the position on their body, because what we do throughout the day. Most of us are sitting throughout the day. So they're always letting the muscle on stretch throughout the day. And a muscle that's on a chronic stretch is going to sign a work there. And so that's the second source of the fire. The third one is asymmetry. Common patterns of compensation. So we're very different on the inside. We have a big, heavy heart up here. We got 3 lobes of the lung on our right side. We got 2 little lobes on our left side. We got a big, heavy liver down on the right side. And so because of these differences, another analogy I like to use is if we cut off our arms and legs and we just have trunks floating through space, then they're always going to want to extend and go to the right. So our diaphragm, the way our organs are positioned, it wants to extend and pull things to the right. But the problem is the finish line is that way. So we got to rotate and extend back to get our eyes going this way to go to the finish line. So because of that, some really smart people have found that there's common patterns that compensate for these asymmetries. When we're doing these endurance activities on a trunk that is asymmetrical, we'll see these patterns in injury. So I want to talk about the asymmetries a little bit more. So the body's not symmetric. Again, we have 3 big lobes on one side of the lung, 2 small lobes on the other side. Our right diaphragm is 2/3 bigger than our left, so it's a strong, powerful diaphragm that leads to a lot of the pull and extension. And then we tend to stand on our right leg in favor of counterclockwise. Everyone likes to stand like this because it's more comfortable. Because essentially the way our organs are positioned in our body, we like to be like this. So we like to be like the statue of David here. We're stuck in our right hip, but then we're rotating and extending left. And when we see athletes, they kind of test like this. And so again, it leads to these predictable patterns of compensation. I think it's big in endurance athletes. An art term is contrapposto. It's an Italian term that they used to use a lot of the classic paintings. They always used to draw people on one leg and they rotate to the other leg. It's more of a dynamic feel for the painting. Used to do a lot of art today. Actually, an art major told me that when we were talking about this. The patient and I told me about that, so here it is. And so some visual signs of asymmetry. I don't know how well you can see that. The guy on your left here, he's a high-level cyclist in town there in Cold Collins. And I don't know if you can see with the light, but you see his right ribs are quite angled down here. His left ribs are kind of sticking up and out. They're at a different angle. His right shoulder is quite a bit lower than his left, and his arms are just hanging differently. So essentially, he's kind of stuck like David. And I just asked him to just stand there, relax. And he came in for some left knee pain. The left knee pain was bugging him for about 4 or 5 months on the leg. And we addressed the asymmetries there, and he's able to try to find what we can see. The other one, the picture on your right, is an X-ray patient brought in. So someone told her to just lay down an X-ray. I think this is a frog pose, so her legs are kind of spread out. So they told her to lay with her legs out, and you can see it's really different here. If you look at the brain here at the bottom part of the pelvis, those should both be looking at you. As Brad on the PT and your owner of Rebound says, they're like sunglasses. The sunglasses should be looking at you. But in this one, you can see that she's just kind of rotating. It's in a different position. And so those are just some visual signs. The other thing that we'll see with the asymmetry is that one or both legs turn out when they're sitting or standing or even running. Some people, when you're running, you'll see people with a little leg whip kick their leg out. They're trying to compensate for some asymmetries up at the pelvis. We'll also see overdevelopment of compensatory muscles. The guy on your right there, I don't know how you guys can see that, but he's a cyclist, and you can see just how big his left quad is. His outside quad is huge, and it's trying to be a butt muscle for him. We'll also see really strong back muscles, just tight neck muscles that are trying to control this asymmetrical position. We'll see people, when we do the eval, when we talk to them, they're always standing on one leg, just on one side all the time, usually it's the right leg. And then when they run, or when they walk, they only like to swing one arm. If you start watching people, a lot of people just swing one arm when they're walking. And that's because they're kind of stuck like David, they're not rotating correctly. And when they run, often have one arm will swing across their body. I went to the CSU track meet a couple of weeks ago and watched the steeplechase. And they had probably 10 or 11 guys in the steeplechase race. And I think nine of them had the left arm was just crossing the body. We see that a lot because of these asymmetries. These are all indicators for us that their asymmetries are getting out of control and it could be linked to an injury. We'll see elevated red on the left, again, just different left and right. And again, usually the right shoulder is lower than the left on a lot of these people who have asymmetries that are going out of control. So if you look at the guy on the left there, his shoulders are they're way different. His scapula is sitting differently on his shoulder blade. So when he's swimming 3,000-4,000 yards, he's going to have different wear in his shoulder. It's going to lead to an injury. Let's see asymmetries of, again, elsewhere in the body, the head and the face, the rib cage. We'll see curvature of the spine on people with scoliosis. That's driven by some of the internal asymmetries in the body. In triathletes, again, if the asymmetry is getting a little too much, if it's getting out of control, we'll see abnormal shoe wear. So the outside of one foot will wear, the front of the foot will wear differently. That's to compensate for pelvis that's in a different position. We'll see abnormal wear on the chamois. So on your cycling shorts, a lot of people just have the right, under the right butt, kind of wear out quicker than the left. And then some people can have difficulty breathing both sides. Part of that's a coordination thing, but part of it too, if they're stuck in these asymmetrical patterns, it's hard to rotate to both sides. And so I spent a lot of, so with the fire, we just talked about some things with the fire. I talked a lot about the asymmetry because I think that's a really big deal. You see that in the clinic a lot, and we're addressing that a lot. And I think that's the future of injury prevention. When you open a Runner's World in 10 years or Triathlon magazine, I think you're going to have articles talking about how you're balancing your normal asymmetry in your body. And you're going to have exercises for that. So I think that's something that, again, we see a lot in the clinic, and it's really important to keep in check. But in reality, these three things are working together to lead to an injury. So your muscle imbalance, where you're just getting strong in this one blend of motion, neuromuscular inhibition or overactivation, some muscles are working too hard, some muscles aren't working well enough, and then the body's natural asymmetry. So if we find one, if you have too much of a muscle imbalance, we're going to see the asymmetries and we're going to see the muscle inhibition. But vice versa, if we see a lot of inhibition, especially in the glutes, we're going to see the imbalances in the different kinds of motion and the asymmetry. So they're all kind of working together, and that's what we have to address and go after for injury prevention. So what are common triathlon injuries that we see in the clinic? What are the common alarms that you guys read about and that we see in the clinic? Well, knee injuries, we'll see a lot of knee injuries. Patellofemoral pain is a big one. has a lot of different names: runner's knee, chondromalacia, patella-tracking syndrome, ancient knee pain, all kinds of different names. But what that means, if you come in and say, man, Craig, I have chondromalacia or I have patella-tracking syndrome, the doctor told me I have this. All that tells me is that you probably don't have a butt muscle that's working really good. Because when we're running, it's our big butt muscle that's controlling our knee for you guys. So if we're running and I'm at freeze frame here, our glute muscle is stabilizing our leg and preventing the knee from going in. So if the glute muscle, the muscles around the hip aren't working right, it's going to lead to a lot of the knee pain. Also see IT band syndrome, which is another indicator for me that they got a lazy butt that's not doing their job. It's putting a lot of stress on the outside of their knee. Meniscus injuries, those could be from an acute incident. You have football players who can knee and have a meniscus injury, or it can be overuse of a lot of abdominal support in the knee. Patella tendonitis, overuse of the patella tendon. But again, all that we gotta look at that and we'll diagnose it and we'll write in the chart saying, yeah, you have patella tendonitis, but really we gotta go after the fire. That's an alarm for your knee. Also see ankle, foot, and lower leg injuries. You see a lot of plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, tendinosis. And those are kind of related to. If we look at a cadaver, or we peel the skin away from someone's calf, we'd see the calf muscle, and that blends right into the Achilles, and then that blends in right into the plantar fascia. So it's one continuous tissue. And a cadaver, you can't dissect those apart. And so when we see Achilles tendonitis, calf strains, plantar fasciitis, you got to ask, why is that working so hard? Why is there so much stress in that area? And again, usually it comes back to the hips. What I talked a little bit last week is when we're running, you got to think about hip extension. We're pushing on the glutes and the hamstrings and not our toes. If we're using our calf too much, if we're pulling ourselves forward, it's going to break down one of those structures. Stress reactions to stress fractures. It's a combination of training volume and abdominal mechanics. Medial tibial stress syndrome, or the old school name is the shin splints, this pain in your shin. And then there's other ones that we'll see. But again, all those, you got to look further up in the body. The shoulder, like in the old school term used to be a swimmer shoulder, which I always thought was funny because people would come in and say, oh, my shoulder hurts when I swim, and I guess someone just said, oh, then you have swimmer shoulder, so just stop swimming. But that's a combination of the shoulder impingement. It could be a biceps tendonitis, rotator cuff tendonitis, or bursitis. All scary names, but what that means is that your shoulder blade and your arm aren't moving very well together. And so when we're reaching and we're swimming and we're going for the catch in the pool, in the swimming pool, our shoulder blade and the arm aren't moving together, so it's leading to an impingement in one of these massive veins. So again, we got to look at how the shoulder blade's moving and how it's sitting on the rib blade. Other common injuries we'll see are hamstring overuse injuries. Again, with the hamstring issue, we got to be looking at the butt muscle again. Because when we're running, we're propelling ourselves forward. If our glute muscle isn't taking its fair share of the work, then our hamstring will jump in and help us out. And it could cause strain. We'll see hip tendonitis and bursitis, which is pain on the outside of the hip. Low back pain, I think, is the lumbar spine versus SI joint pain. I think for most endurance athletes, most triathletes, that's related to the asymmetries that we talked about. Their asymmetries are getting a little bit too much and having too much stress on the low back and SI. Hip impingement is pain deep in your groin. Feels like a hip flexor strain, or just other isolated muscle overuse. So again, I went through that kind of quick, but there's so many possible injuries out there we can't spend each time on those. And for injury prevention and to manage it, to address your injuries, it doesn't matter as much because we want to go after the fire. We want to go after these three things here. Whether it's, again, the muscle imbalance, the planes of motions that we got in the muscular inhibition or overactivation, or the asymmetry. So when we're designing an injury prevention program, we want to look at these three things. We want to go after this. We can't go after each injury that's acute level. So injury prevention, why is injury prevention important? Well, you can be in less pain. No one likes to be in pain. It can be more efficient, like we talked about, or I talked a little bit last week with, if you have improved running mechanics, there's potential for us that we can run faster and farther. Same with injury prevention stuff. If we're utilizing our muscles in a better way, in a more efficient way, we can become more efficient. The last patient I saw today, actually, she's a pretty high-level mastery runner in town. She's getting very in tune with her body, and so she's been dealing with some of the asymmetry stuff we talked about. Tuesday morning, she's doing a track workout, and she's doing mile repeats. And she missed the first mile, she felt slow, she felt sluggish. She went over, did some of her PT exercises, and her next 2 mile repeats were 10 to 15 seconds faster than the previous one, and she landed at the same effort level. And so I think with a lot of people, if you're engaging the muscles more efficiently, you're going to be a lot more efficient and have better performance. And then you keep doing what you love. If you're not injured, you keep doing what you love. I know if I'm not training, if I'm not working out regularly, I'm a different person. I'm a lot more moody. You can probably ask me like that. If I'm more moody, I'm just not myself. So I think it's really important. When should you consider injury prevention stuff? So when should we look at some of this stuff? Well, if you have recurring injuries, you keep dealing with the same stuff, you take some time off, you get training again, it hurts again. Then something biomechanically is off. You got a fire that's going out of control, and you got to go after it. The analogy we'll use is actually I drive an older Subaru. It's like 13 or 14 years old now. It's developed this clicking noise as I accelerate. I think it's my CV joint or a wheel bearing, but that's right. But it's making a noise. What I don't want to do is just put it in the garage and park it for 2 months, because when I drive it in, it's probably going to make the same noise. I got to take it into the car shop and probably got to be a wheel bearing. Same thing with our body. You don't just shut it down. You don't just take a month or 2 off and hope it gets better. Again, you got it after the biomechanical issue. You should also consider if you feel asymmetrical stress points. So a lot of people will come in and my left knee's hurting me, but also my right foot and my right groin's kind of bugging me, and my low back's hurting me. So if you have these different aches and pains on each side of your body, then you have some abnormal biomechanics going on. You should also look at it after an injury or period of immobilization. So what we'll see in the clinic is if people are in a boot. Has anyone been in like a boot, had like a foot injury, and had to wear like a funky boot all the time? At least maybe. And so when we're like that, when we have this big heavy boot on the bottom of our foot, that often throws off our mechanics too, so we got to look at that stuff for that. And then increasing our training volume. So another analogy we'll use is if your car's out of alignment a little bit, your tires are going to wear funny. But if you just go back and forth the safe way, you're not going to see very much tire wear. But if you start going back and forth to Denver every day, they're going to wear pretty quickly. So I think if we increase our turning volume, if I go from 2 hours a week of training to 10 hours, then our chances for injury can be a little bit up. And if we're a little asymmetric or we have a little biomechanical issues going on, it's going to lead to aches and pains. So short-term versus long-term prevention stuff. Short-term is like when you go out and run and you strain it, or you're playing volleyball and you strain your inner thigh or your groin. Then there is a period that you do have to have some rest and let the tissue heal. You got to consider some icing and some posturing. Maybe take a few days off of running and work on swimming the bike. Long term is what we're talking more about today. It's addressing the fire. Again, the asymmetry, inhibition, overactivation of the muscles, or the imbalance. And then we have to have the strength endurance. We got to be able to hold the good biomechanics for miles and miles into our run or bike ride. So prevention, what do we look for here in the clinic? So if you guys come in, or if you guys end up doing a consult here, there are certain things we look at to see if you're at risk for injury. We look at range of motion, we look for symmetry on each side. If one leg moves 30 degrees one way and the other leg just moves 10 degrees, then you're kind of driving on a bent car frame. And that's going to lead to abnormal tire wear and abnormal wheel bearings or something that causes clicking noise. We'll also have, we'll test out muscle firing patterns. We call it neuromuscular or neuroproprioceptive testing. We test a bunch of muscles and see if they're working right in the correct position. We'll look at functional stability and strength to see how you can move in a more upright, functional manner. We'll look at your gait. We'll look at sometimes look at running and walking gait. We can look at your bike. Also do a strength endurance test. So I have a patient right now. He gets knee pain after 10 miles of running. So we'll get him in and we test him out and say, okay, go run 10 miles, and then he comes back and we time the equipment accordingly and see what's happened. Did he lose motion? Did he get too asymmetrical or did some muscle stop working, and then we didn't kind of know why his knees hurting. Rebound also has what's called a ready, set, go program where we screen entire teams. So we do a lot of cross country, CSU basketball, CSU golf, where we at the beginning of the season the coaches get them in here and we do all kinds of testing to see who's at risk for an injury. So if we see a lot of these things pop up, the range of motion asymmetries, the muscle inhibitions, then we red flag them and do something about it before they get hurt. So what we came up with, so we can't test every triathlete out there unless they're on a team, but we came up with some self-testing things to do to see if you're at risk for an injury, to see if you have a fire boiling and that's about to turn off some alarms. And so why should we even do some self-testing techniques? Well, we talked about the body's not symmetrical, but all of our activities are running, biking, and swimming should be. We're asking equal demands on each side of our body. With some of the self-testing that we'll do, we'll see if the proper muscles are doing what they should be doing. And then if they're not doing what they should be doing, you can address it. You can correct it before it becomes an alarm. So you can use it as a preventive tool. And all the ones that we came up with, we can do that. So again, does anyone have an injury? Maybe let people just raise their hand. An ache and pain going on right now that wants to volunteer to show some tests. You want to do it? What's going on? You want to go? So come up here. Well, so the first one, a lot of these, or some of these you guys can do in the chair, at least this first one you can. It's just like a glute isometric contraction. So first everyone can do this, squeeze both butt muscles together, squeeze both cheeks together, and then relax, and then try to squeeze one at a time. Squeeze your right cheek and then your left cheek. And try to do it without tensing your leg. So you don't want to do it, you don't want to try to tighten your butt muscle and tighten your quad muscle, because that's telling me your brain thinks your butt muscle is your quad muscle. That's not good. You feel a difference?
Yeah, I can't do it.
And that's the side that your knee hurts.
Well, I mean, I can tighten my butt.
Okay. So it's a different, yeah. And so again, when he's out there running, it's his glute muscle that's stabilizing that knee. If it's not firing out, or if it thinks it's your quad that's your butt muscle, then this knee's going to have some asymmetry or some abnormal stress on it. Cause some pain. So that's one test. It's an easy test, kind of a goofy test. A lot of people have a hard time just squeezing one side at a time. That's a really important thing to know how to do, and we want each glute to operate independently of the other, because they need to be working independently when you walk and run. And so you pass this test if you're able to contract both equally, and it feels the same on both sides. We consider it a fail if your leg tightens on one side, or if they just feel different. Some people just feel like one is full and the other is kind of empty. So that's the first test we have. Second test is a prone hip extension. So right yourself. What's your name? So this one, you just lie on your stomach and go flat on your stomach. You can use a pillow if it allows you back to be in this position. But now just lift one leg up, like an inch off the table. What do you feel working? Your leg, butt, or back? Feel a lot of back muscles? Okay. Go back down and try your left side. That's working. More butt there. So this is considered a pass if we feel more butt muscle. We want our glute muscle to be extending our leg back. Like last week when we talked a little bit about running mechanics, it's our glute muscle pushing our leg back to propel us forward. So this is a test that we want most of the glute muscle to do it. If it's not, it's telling me that either his back muscles want to do it so they're overactive, or he could just have a tight hip and it's hard for him to do that. So just again, a simple test. A lot of athletes that we've seen, they do this regularly. When they test off like this, then they go back to their exercises. Does that make sense? The next one is a bridge. So John, flip on your back. So it's bend both knees. So this is a common exercise a lot of people have done before. What I have you do is just push your hips up off the table. And what do you feel working at? Hamstrings. Okay. And then back down. The other thing we can do is go one leg at a time. So let's try a bridge with both feet first. So bridge up and just lift one leg up. What do you feel on this side? Up hamstring. And switch sides. Okay. So it's kind of hard to hold up. So with this one, we have a couple different pictures. This is more in modeling for us. So we can do the bridge up with both feet. Again, ideally, you want mostly glute doing that. If it's not, if it's a lot of back muscles or hamstrings, that means they're trying to take over. And then we can try it on one leg and compare the difference. Like John said, it's kind of harder on his left side compared to his right. The right side probably feels strong. And so that's just looking at the differences in the asymmetries left and right. Does that make sense? The next one is a single leg sit to stand. So John, go ahead and stop. We're going to use a chair here. This is a more of a functional test of strength, essentially. This is kind of a little chair, but sit on the edge of the black chair there. John, what I'll have you do is go arms across the chest with one leg up. And try to stand up with one leg as you can. Nice. He does that really well. What we're looking for, yeah, he does that awesome. So what we're looking for is, let's try the right side. The big thing we're looking for is the difference. And the athlete or the patient will feel this. Just to see if he's more balanced on one side or just more strong on one side. How's it feel? Oh, okay. So we don't all so is it? Yeah, there's a well rounded, right? So another simple test. If you're different on one side than the other, then again, some asymmetries or just a weakness going on one leg. Because you don't want a leg that is super easy to pop up and another leg that it's a struggle to get up. And then ask both legs to go run 26.2 miles per track. So another little test there. The next one is sitting, so sit up on back on the bench here. This is one we came up to look at we came up with to look at the asymmetries. So sitting on a desk or a chair, bring both knees together, and then kick both feet out to the side. And all we're looking for is if it's different. You guys in charity see a difference, but what we don't want, if you look at Lauren here on the left, he's moving fairly evenly. The legs go the same distance. On the right here, your left leg doesn't go quite as far as the right side. So if you look down, do you see a difference on the other side now? No. Maybe this one. So again, we're just looking for differences, and you're just looking to see how much weight you see. We can put a box down there. The next one is a standing reach test. So this is another flexibility test. So stand up just from your table there. Your feet together, and just go down towards your toes as far as you go down. And so what we're looking for with this one, for an endurance athlete, is we just want the fingers to go to the toes. You can come back up now. If they go down, or if you go down at home and you can only get here, then that means that probably the back muscles have gotten pretty tight, and it could be the hamstrings too. But most people, the back muscles are just way too tight for most athletes. What we don't want either is to go all the way up the palms of the floor. Because then you almost got too flexible. That was pretty flexible. Well, what's your background down? Gymnastics, yeah. So he's built up a lot of flexibility from gymnastics. For endurance athletes, we're asking our body to do the same movement for an hour, 2 or 3, 7 hours. You got to have a certain amount of flexibility, of tightness, I should say. So if we're too flexible, then our back and all this stuff will not hold up for that long. So you're going to pass his fingers and toes. We consider it a fail if you can't quite make it to your toes, or if you go too far. This next one is just a full squat. So what I'll have you do, John, is just feet about hip width apart, and then squat down as hard as you feel comfortable. All the way down if you can. That's pretty good. And then back up. So another test of your mobility throughout. This is an awesome one that looks at your ankle mobility, knee, hip, and back. If our back muscles are too strong and tight, you can't squat down. Or if our calf muscles are too tight, you can't squat all the way down. So that might be a good one. The last one is a self-shoulder impingement test. So this one, I'll have you put one hand on the opposite shoulder, lift your elbow up to your nose. Well, yeah, you guys can do this too. What is that uncomfortable? Yeah, this shoulder. Okay, and then try the other side. So this one we're looking for. Okay, yeah, we're looking for a difference turns in motion. So one arm may only go up a little bit, the other arm might go up to your nose. Or we're looking for pain. So it's considered a pass if you have no pain in equal motion, and we consider a fail if there's different motions in each other or pain. So this is an improvement test where we're putting a ball on the side of our shoulder in just a compromised position. I think that's that was the last one. So again, 8 or 9 self-tests we came up with. If you want a description of these, I think we can post on our website. But these are just little things that we actually can look at in the clinic. We do this throughout the day with people and see if they're passing or failing this. But all these things we came up with is stuff you can do on your own to see if you're at risk for an injury. So at the beginning of the season, you do some of these, and it does awesome and great. But after season, and halfway through, you do them, and you lift your leg up, and you can't feel your butt muscle, you can't squeeze your butt muscle anymore. And you got to get some equipment to address that before injuries happens. So prevention. So again, we talked about external and internal factors. External factors are, I guess I should say, things we didn't talk about today. It's the training mileage and intensity, the training surfaces, shoes, bike fit mechanics, all the stuff we talked about last week. So again, you can have awesome biomechanics, but if you go and run 20 miles every day, something's probably going to break down unless you're a really gifted athlete. Training surfaces, if you're running on concrete a lot and you're sensitive to harder contact, then you're not going to get injured despite having really good biomechanics. Shoes, good footwear make a big difference. Having a bike fit with after a good bike fit specialist, and then proper mechanics are big in one of the external factors of what leads to injury. The internal factors are what we talked about today, the biomechanics, with the fire and the alarm. So what should we do? What are some take-home messages? So if I was here 15 years ago, what would I want to know? So I didn't keep getting injured, and I could have run for CU if I was fast enough. So what can I do to stay injury free? Well, the top one would be to strengthen and feel the movements. So we got to feel it, because again, muscles are always in a state of contraction and relaxation. We can do a movement like the leg lift on your stomach. That could be all hamstring or back trying to do it. So we want to find things that you actually feel is loop, engage, and work. So we don't want to just do a machine, even though if the machine out there says it should be working our glutes, but we just feel all quad or back muscle, then it's probably not a good exercise for us. And we want to strengthen things in different planes of motion. Again, the sagittal plane, this running, and the cycling plane right here, we get really strong at and really powerful in that plane of motion. We want to go to outside movements. We want to work on some rotation. And make sure strength is symmetrical, like you did here with the leg lifts and the sit to stands. You don't want one leg that's super strong, the other leg that's way lagging behind. That's a good way to happen. And then exhale. A lot of our sports where our back muscles are on, they're getting tight, we're always gasping for air, whether it's running or swimming, we're always gasping and breathing and reaching and extending. We gotta balance that out. We have to breathe out once in a while. And so Eric kept asking me what my top 3 injury prevention techniques were for each sport. And we figured out some ideas, but what I came up with are just our top 3 things for triathletes. Not for each sport, but just the top 3 things. First one we talked about were to strengthen and feel the glutes. And we have hundreds and hundreds of exercises to do this, depending on the person or situation. I threw a couple pictures up there. One is just a clamshell being used. It's a clamshell, kind of a basic one, but a good one to really isolate the glute. Resistant side stepping, where Phoebe's having a band around her ankles, and she just steps slowly to the side, so she's getting out of that sagittal plane, and she's working on some strengthening of the different planes of motion. The one on the right is called a retro step, that we use a lot in the clinic. If you guys have ever been here for an injury, we'll use that a lot. She's essentially walking backwards up a flight of the stairs, really using her glute with each step. I don't know the more complicated movement, but the one I use a lot, so I threw it in there. The other thing is that for injury prevention for triathletes, we want to integrate abdominals with your shoulder muscle. So Eric also has another good teaching tool. When we're swimming, when we go through the pull phase, he calls it kind of a torsional spring, where we're pulling and it's our abdominals like pulling our trunk back the other way. to go into the next stroke. So really the pull phase of our swimming, it's not just a shoulder movement. It's a pull, it's an ab, it's a pec, it's a lat exercise, it's a core exercise. So we want to make sure we're strong and we're able to support our shoulder with our abdominals and our pec muscles. So I came up, so a couple pictures here. These are called all four belly lifts. For some reason, I guess because you're on all fours. Where she's really getting her back around it, she's getting her abs on, and she's lifting one hand up. So now she's working on the side of her body, and she'll be able to feel it's like a scoop here. The third one on the right is one on her side, so she's working a different plane motion. She's working one of her side abs with her shoulder blade muscles. So kind of little different exercises that are very important for triathletes. We're getting our abs engaged with some shoulder mechanics and movements. The third thing I have that will give out to a lot of athletes are ways to turn off back muscles. So we want to inhibit those muscles that are working too much, just like we want to turn on muscles that aren't working enough, like our knee muscles. So with our sport, we want to use our back muscles a lot. Part of it is the asymmetry thing, where our back always wants to extend and go to the right, but then we want to go forward, so the rest of our body extends and goes back this way. So we're using a lot of back muscles all the time. So we want to keep that in balance. We want to turn those off a little bit. So these are three kind of simple ones. The one on the left, she's just holding a ball up against the wall, and she's actually blowing up a balloon. She's working on her exhale and her abdominals to blow out the balloon, help her turn off the back muscles. The second one is just an assisted squat. She's going down in that full squat position. She's working on stretching on her calves, she's stretching on her back, and then she's breathing. The last one is called a wall reach, where she's just getting around, working on breathing, and turning off the back muscles. So those were, again, three things overall for triathletes. Not even for each sport, but we'll see a lot with triathletes and endurance athletes. So what should I not do? What we don't want endurance athletes to do is just stretch all the time. There's a lot of studies showing that stretching, the prolonged stretch and hold, like a lot of us probably did in high school, leads to poor performances and possibly more injuries. So we definitely don't want to do that before an activity. What we also don't want is to overstretch our hamstrings. If our hamstrings are feeling tight, it's probably because they're working too hard. Probably because they're trying to be a butt muscle for us. And so if we keep stretching, then it's going to lead to instability and pelvis and potential injuries. And then we don't want to work our low back muscles because they're getting worked so much during our activities that we want to turn those guys off. We want to give them a break and let other muscles do the job on the butt muscles. So just in review, injuries happen. It happen to a lot of us. Again, I stated at the beginning, 65% of us will get injured in a year. That's pretty high. But most injuries have a reason. There's a biomechanical issue that's causing the pain. There's a fire that's setting off those alarms. So we got to find that fire and put it out to address our issues. And then we went over some self-tests to evaluate your risk and to put out that fire before it comes an alarm and to stop doing what you want to do. And finally, talk a lot about glute muscles because we see that a lot. We got to train a lot of butt muscles here. And so that's an important muscle for us as endurance athletes. And so, just a reminder, we have a survey. If you guys can take a moment to fill out, it helps us put on more of these seminars to have feedback. And then there's a free consult for everyone that came. So if you guys have anything going on in your body, check with Casey or Jill or Julie up front, and we can get set you up with a PT here, and we can hopefully help you and help you figure out what's going on. Yeah, are there any questions?
Drills for learning to run softly and striking.
So some drills for that?
Drills to teach you how to do that. Me being a heavy field striker.
A lot of that, what I find with a lot of runners, are taking shorter strides, like we talked about last time. There's one thing that a lot of the experts, coaches agree upon, that most of us were taking just too big of strides. So if we think about just taking a little bit shorter, quicker strides than we maybe used to, that helps a lot of people out. specific drills I know, like the chi running and the close running, honestly I know a little bit about, just enough to be dangerous. But I do know they have a lot of drills. So they have some drills on it, and they have similar philosophies, but different. I would start by just taking shorter, quicker steps and getting mostly working on it, but talking to Eric about it. Getting it out there and watching him coach him if he hasn't done.
What do you think of the shoes that have a really big cushion?
You know, I haven't
Cushion, I've heard about it.
yeah,
Do you think that's
throughout the whole thing or just an idea.
the whole thing? It's they have different ones, but they don't have a 2 millimeter gut. It's pretty flat, but it's a platform shoe. And then the one ones.
I think the deeper this, Steve,
Yeah. Maybe.
I think what do you think about it, Steve?
They're light, they're a little bulky, they're real thick, and the drop is the same, gives it a lot of cushion, so.
A lot of the cities show
Depends on
that,
the person,
well, a lot of the cities show in the different types of footwear to change their strike to react to that. So our foot are very sensitive. So if you take the same person and make them run in a big bulky shoe like that, and watch them analyze your gait, and then have them run barefoot, they'll run quite a bit quicker. But I think that comes back to whether is it all about the shoe or is it all about rechecking the technique and practicing? I think if you can get technique and avoid like the big, this huge moonwalk, running, giant strides, I think there's a lot of potential for that to reduce the reaction force. But I'll have to stop on.
For athletes in general, on some of the glute exercises, would you recommend them doing them on a daily basis for a workout? I know personally there's a few, out of a 4-pack of exercises you gave me that I do pretty much before most of my runs that really helps. So,
Yeah.
pre and post.
I think for most people, it kind of wakes up some of the muscles. A lot of athletes and runners will have them do things pre, like those to kind of get the muscles ready to wake them up. And then there's some we'll do after the inhibition or the back stretching ones. Essentially, I have a lot of runners doing after that. Because as we're running, we're going to be using those muscles, and it's hard to avoid. So after we can just detone those, it helps a lot. I think with a lot of people, I don't want them to be ball and chain with exercises all the time, because then that's just not fun. But at the same time, I think it's important to have it and make it part of your routine, is to make sure just the glutes are working and you're not using back muscles. Because again, I think with humans, again, we have this natural asymmetry that we're asking to do a lot of symmetrical stuff, which run for hours and hours. So I think we're all prone to injuries at some point. So if we keep that balance, which I think it'd be awesome if we did every day, but yeah.
I'll bring up something happened to me because it might have implications for other people. So I was training for the Colorado Marathon with full distance, and I found that I could cover the distance if I do it on a treadmill with an incline, like 2% or 3%. Whereas if I put it down flat, then I wasn't really heel striking, but I was getting more pain and I couldn't go the distance. So I did all my training on a treadmill at 3%. And of course, when it came to the real race, Colorado Marathon's downhill. And it's on hard surface, on a treadmill, which I can do. So I really, as I mentioned, I really messed up in the process. Although it was the only way for me to put the training in. You were talking about how you needed to do 100 to be competitive with CU. Well, I need to be able to do 20-mile runs just to be able to do that distance. And so I found a way that it worked, but I really couldn't get the race. And so I wonder if there's a symmetry. If you're training good, if you train well on an incline, you can't train on an
Yeah.
incline.
Yeah, with going downhill, that will make us overstride because the gravity is pulling us down. So I think we'll hurt a lot more running downhill just because we're fighting gravity with each step more so than 3% up. but it's also coming back to that bigger stride, more of a heel strike that increases the ground reaction force through all the leg. And so, yeah, that makes the car wear not tough. So it makes it fast, but.
You designed that.
Actually, I can counter that. You got an issue with the rotation. My gal like she were in Boston this year, and we did all that training. She ran the bus because we were simulating the course.
Right.
So it does real strike and get off the field. So it's different based on person. You did a really good race there, though. I blame that on John St. Clair.
Cool. And if you have any other questions, I'll hang around for a little bit. And Eric, hang around and talk to you. You guys want to talk more coaching and swimming and training stuff. He's one of the most knowledgeable people I know about it. So asking that. Again, we got a bunch of awesome stuff to give away. So I'll see you. Here we go. So yeah. So again, the giveaways. We have the Horseshoe Tri Training Series. It starts next Wednesday, right? So hopefully you guys all make it out for that. That was super awesome last year, the first year. And I'll plan on being out there Wednesdays or Wednesdays.
You went try Red Sea for that
You roped them at Ruther's Roost. You guys roped them out?
Yeah. What's the water temperature?
It's warm. Steve, you won't need a wetsuit.
I'll cut it out of there. It'll be tough to reach with.
So check out Ruther's Roost. That's come out. And Loveland Lake Triathlon is a sponsor. They're giving out some discounts to the race. Again, I said this last time. Lake Triathlon is my favorite Olympic distance triathlon. It's super fun to have a sprint distance this year. Athletes in Tandem is a great organization in town. Really neat article that you saw posted up on the board. It's a good race for some races coming up. Run Reviews, of course, is I think one of the best sponsors. Probably in the state. They're always at all the races around here, so I encourage you guys to support them. So gave away some shoes tonight and a wetsuit last time. Then Coach Eric Nelson is giving away some training packages. So again, thank those guys if you get a chance. But yeah, so we got a swim cap from Green Events, for Debbie. You can bring it out next week for the tri-train. Another swim cap for Rachel. Oh, yep. Oh, yeah. Sorry. And then Rebecca. Yeah, you guys. Then we got shoes from Ruther's Roost for Dennis.
Hey.
Shoes for Mark Andre. Yo, thanks for coming. And then a race entry for the longest days run. It's racing June 21st, the longest day of the year. It's put on by Athletes in Tandem. So a free race entry to that for Mike. Another one for Edie. Did you races this Friday?
Yeah. Okay, what's it there?
Yeah.
That's it.
And we got the free entry to the Horseshoe Tri Training Series for John. 50 degrees. And then a 1 hour private instruction with Eric for Cheryl.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
And then a $10 discount for the sprint triathlon for Brian Colette. And that's it. So yeah, if you guys have any questions for myself or Eric, coming out a little bit. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I think you guys took away some good information. Are they? Cool.
You can include those all about the fitness. You know what that's And
About
sport about it,
south-
big campus
south
fest.
of Loveland.
That campus fest, well, Freeman's Fest isn't really close up top, but I think it's sport about like by campus fest shops. On Elizabeth, I think they do some cool stuff. 3 feet over the all of it. And we had one for late for Paul Fest. Like going now, those will be available prior to this.
Yeah, again, if you guys could fill out the survey, we'd appreciate that. It just helps us put on these in the future. And then if you can leave the surveys out at the front, with the gals in the front, we really appreciate that.